September 12, 1988 was a day that shook Lawrence, Massachusetts to its core. The lifeless body of a little girl, just 11 years old, was found brutally stabbed to death and abandoned on the train tracks near the Boston and Maine railway yard. Her name was Melissa Tremblay, and her senseless murder left the community reeling with shock, anger, and sadness. Who could have committed such a heinous act? How did they finally catch him after 35 years? Today, we're taking a closer look at a 35-year-old cold case finally solved in 2023 in Lawrence, Massachusetts. Buckle up and get ready to join us on a journey into the unknown. But first, if you haven't subscribed to our channel by now, please consider hitting the subscribe and like buttons. Without further ado, let's get to the story. Nestled along the winding banks of the Merrimack River, Lawrence is a vibrant and thriving city that captures the essence of small-town charm with big city excitement. The city's pulse beats with the energy of its diverse and passionate residents, whose pride and joy for their beloved community are palpable in every corner of the town. As you walk down the bustling streets of Lawrence, you can't help but feel a sense of history and heritage seeping through every brick and stone. This is the same town that played a pivotal role in American labor history, where the Bread and Roses strike of 1912 marked a significant turning point for workers' rights and social justice. But it was here that a horrific crime took place in 1988. Melissa Tremblay was born in 1977 to her mother Janet Tremblay in Salem, Massachusetts. Her mother Janet raised her as a single mother on her own, as her father was never in the picture, and his identity remains unknown till this day. Melissa went by the nickname Missy and attended Lancaster School. Everyone who knew Melissa as a child described her as a fun-loving, carefree, and caring little girl who had many friends in school and was always ready to play games and have a good time. Melissa was a happy child who loved to play and explore her surroundings. One of her favorite places to play was the Boston and Maine railway yard, where she would often spend hours running and jumping around the train tracks while her mother visited friends at a nearby social club. Sadly, this would also be what led to her demise. On 11 September 1988, Melissa accompanied her mother and her boyfriend to the LaSalle Social Club in Lawrence, not far from the railway where she was found, and went outside to play while the adults stayed inside. The last sightings of her alive were made by a railroad employee and a pizza delivery driver who were in the vicinity, both who saw her within the late afternoon hours of that day. When Janet realized her daughter was missing, she frantically searched the area before reporting her missing to the police at around 9 p.m. that night. She returned home in a state of panic, hoping and praying for news of her daughter's safety. Unfortunately, she would never receive this news. On the morning of 12 September 1988, Melissa was found dead in the old Boston and Maine railway yard in Lawrence. She had been stabbed to death, and her leg was amputated post-mortem when a train ran over her body. The detectives who arrived on the scene theorized that the killer had likely done this in the hopes of mangling the body and removing any possible physical evidence they had left behind. The state police and Lawrence police launched a massive investigation into Melissa's death. They combed through every inch of railroad yard and scoured other places, including the Lancaster Grammar School, where Melissa was a student. The community was in shock and disbelief that such a heinous crime could happen in their small town. The lead detective on the case was Lawrence police officer Detective Thomas Murphy. He was shocked at the brutality of the murder and decided to relentlessly pursue justice for Melissa. He and his team recovered physical evidence from the body and at the crime scene, but the nature of this evidence was never revealed. However, the forensic team that analyzed the body found that the nature of her stab wounds indicated that her killer was left-handed. Since no arrests were made at the time, it is assumed that the evidence they gathered was not viable to be used in the investigation then, which is why it was shelved for later, when forensic technology would develop enough for it to be used. Numerous witnesses, suspects, and persons of interest were interviewed by the police, and the only lead they found was that there was a suspicious-looking van in the area Melissa was in the day she was murdered. But when they inquired further, no one was able to help them identify the van or its owner. Despite their exhaustive efforts, the police were unable to find Melissa's killer. The killer remained at large, and the community remained in fear. Melissa's family and friends were left to mourn their loss and try to come to terms with the unimaginable tragedy that had befallen them. And as time went by, they found no new leads. The case remained unsolved, and eventually the trail went cold. Finally, in 2014, over 25 years after the death of Melissa, the cold case was re-examined by authorities, and lead investigator, Lieutenant Peter Sherva, decided that the case should be reopened. After going over the old case files and reviewing the evidence left behind from the original investigation, the detectives knew what they had to do. A few years later, the evidence recovered from Melissa's body was submitted for testing, and in 2022, 33 years later, detectives finally had a suspect. On 26 April 2022, 74-year-old Marvin McClendon Jr., a former Massachusetts corrections officer, was arrested in his home in Bremen, Alabama for her murder by the Alabama State Police. While the nature of the evidence that was used to ascertain his guilt was never released to the public, the press release did state that the evidence recovered from the body was crucial in identifying him as a suspect. And then, when detectives probed deeper into his life, a whole set of incriminating details came to light. Although it is not clear how McClendon became a suspect in the case or how the DNA testing was carried out, the result was a resounding success for the tireless work of investigators and law enforcement officials who had been working tirelessly to solve the case for over 3 decades. Thanks to the DNA evidence, investigators were able to track McClendon down to his home in Bremen, Alabama, where he was promptly arrested and charged with being a fugitive from justice. The arrest was made on the evening of April 26, 2022, and marked the culmination of years of hard work, determination, and dedication on the part of law enforcement officials and investigators. While the details of how McClendon was finally brought to justice remain unclear, what is certain is that the use of DNA evidence has played a critical role in solving this long-standing cold case. McClendon was a retired Massachusetts Department of Corrections employee, but he wasn't working for the state in 1988. He worked for the department on 3 separate occasions from 1970 to 2002, but at the time of the murder was involved in carpentry work in Chelmsford, a locality close to Lawrence. Investigators discovered that McClendon had several connections to Lawrence, a nearby town where the young girl's lifeless body was found near a set of train tracks. Their investigation revealed that McClendon frequented various locations within Lawrence, including the Seventh-day Adventist Church situated on Salem Street. He also had a van that looked like one that witnesses saw Melissa Ann near on the day she disappeared. These findings shed light on McClendon's proximity to the location of the murder, prompting further inquiry into his possible involvement in the crime. In the year of 1988, McClendon, who was at the age of 41, had gained a reputation for being an individual with an uncontrollable temper, and was known to have a violent and aggressive nature when under the influence of alcohol. He was reported to have frequently visited strip clubs where he would engage in activities deemed inappropriate and disrespectful towards women. Furthermore, he was known to have indulged in sexual relations with women in the back of his van, which added to his already tarnished image. These facts were previously presented in a court hearing by Strasnick, his brother. Mr. McClendon was represented in his trial by a court-appointed attorney, Mr. Fazold, since his arrest. However, during a hearing, a probation employee testified that Mr. McClendon did not meet the criteria for appointed counsel. During a hearing regarding the motion to dismiss filed by Henry Fazold, McClendon's defense attorney, McClendon's own brother Strasnick argued against the motion. He presented evidence to counter Fazolt's claim that the DNA evidence collected was not sufficient to support a first-degree murder indictment against his client. According to court documents, the lawyer representing McClendon pointed out that his client had voluntarily provided a DNA sample to investigators during his initial interview with Massachusetts State Police Lieutenant Peter Sherber, which took place in Alabama back in 2021. Despite using a walker, McClendon made his way into the courtroom in Salem Superior Court on Tuesday, where he was seated next to his attorney, Fazold. In the month of April in the year 2022, during a follow-up interview conducted by the authorities, McClendon vehemently denied any involvement in the tragic demise of Melissa. He asserted that he was innocent of the accusations that had been laid upon him, and even insinuated that he might have been the victim of a carefully orchestrated plot by inmates from the Department of Corrections in Massachusetts where he had worked. Such a statement was not only a blatant attempt to deflect the blame, but also a preposterous attempt to mislead the authorities. Strasnick pointed out that the DNA evidence was collected from the crime scene and matched the DNA profile of a male relative of McClendon. He argued that the probability of the DNA belonging to someone else other than McClendon was extremely low. Furthermore, he stated that the DNA evidence was only one piece of evidence in the case and that there were other factors that supported the indictment against his brother. McClendon's attempts to absolve himself of any responsibility did not stop there. He went on to shift the blame to his own flesh and blood, his brother Strasnick, in an act of treacherous betrayal that demonstrated his willingness to throw anyone under the bus to save his own skin. His attempts to paint his own kin as the mastermind behind the crime spoke volumes about his own lack of loyalty and trustworthiness. Strasnick vehemently opposed the claim that his brother was a factually innocent person. He provided examples of McClendon's erratic behavior leading up to and following the murder, and argued that these actions were indicative of guilt. He also stated that McClendon had a history of violence as aforementioned, which made him a likely suspect in the murder case. This statement by Fasold indicates that the investigation centered on McClendon instead of his family members, due to specific pieces of evidence that were available at the time. These included Mr. McClendon's left-handedness, his potential ties to Lawrence, his possession of a van in 1988, his lifestyle at the time, and his interactions with law enforcement during the investigation. However, the statement sounded suspicious, and this explanation was likely an attempt to absolve Mr. McClendon of any wrongdoing, and may have been a calculated and misleading move. During the court hearing, Judge Salim Tabit presided over a motion to dismiss the case against the defendant, Mr. McClendon, who had been charged with first-degree murder. The judge listened carefully to the arguments presented in the motion and took the matter under advisement, refraining from making an immediate decision. It is worth noting that the charge of first-degree murder is a very serious offense and carries the potential penalty of life in prison without the possibility of parole. As such, this case is being closely watched by all parties involved, and the outcome of the upcoming hearing will likely have a significant impact on the course of the trial. Fasold has attempted in vain to secure McClendon's release on a $50,000 bond. At Middleton Jail, he is still being held without bond. Fasold also stated that there were no eyewitnesses to the murder of Tremblay, and there was no evidence to suggest that McClendon knew her or had any motive to harm her. Despite this, McClendon has been held in protective custody in a cell at Middleton Jail. As part of his confinement, he is not allowed to leave his cell unless accompanied by a guard. This precautionary measure has been taken to ensure McClendon's safety and the safety of others, given the high-profile nature of the case and the potential risks associated with his involvement in it. By keeping him in protective custody, authorities can closely monitor his movements and interactions to prevent any potential harm or disturbances within the jail or outside. According to Sherry Carignan, a friend of Melissa who was present at McClendon's arraignment, she was only 10 years old when the crime occurred, and when she saw the defendant, she imagined a different person than what she saw in court. She described McClendon as a frail, old man. Melissa's other friend, Andrea Ganley, who preferred not to have her face shown, had a message for the defendant. Took the life of an 11-year-old girl, and then you went on for another 33 years walking free? And where was she? In a grave. According to a statement made by Danielle Root on behalf of Melissa Ann's family, Melissa was found dead in a train yard in Lawrence on September 12, 1988. Many people blame my aunt for Missy's death. Well, I don't believe that she made the right decision that night. That's between her and God. He made the decision to take a life that night for whatever reason, and he's finally going to face a judge and jury for that decision. A day after she was reported missing, the family had never expected that it would take 33 and a half years to see someone arrested and brought before a judge for Melissa's murder. Despite this delay, the family is confident that the district attorney's office will be just as dedicated to prosecuting the case as the detectives were in their years-long search for the suspect, Marvin McClendon. According to a statement, Root stated that there had been a lot of emotion since the end of April when they were informed of the arrest, ranging from excitement to sadness to frustration and all over the place. They were thrilled to see the suspect in jail, but also very saddened that some of their family members, such as their aunt, grandfather, and others, were not alive to witness him facing justice. The statement went on to express gratitude to the police for their ongoing efforts throughout the years and for the use of DNA technology that was not originally available to work the case. Root finished by saying that their family was looking forward to the case moving forward to the grand jury for indictment and then on to the Superior Court to finally see justice served. Thank you for watching this video on how DNA has revolutionized the field of forensic investigation and helped solve numerous cold cases that had remained unsolved for years. As you have seen, DNA technology has been a boon for law enforcement agencies, allowing them to identify and apprehend perpetrators of heinous crimes that had remained undetected for decades. With the help of DNA evidence, investigators can now link suspects to crime scenes, identify victims who had remained unidentified, and even exonerate innocent people who had been wrongfully accused and convicted. This has not only brought closure to families of victims, but also ensured that the perpetrators are held accountable for their actions. If you want to learn more about cold cases and how DNA technology has been used to solve them, be sure to keep watching Cold Case Files. You never know, you might learn something that can help solve a case that has remained unsolved for years. Thank you again for watching, and if you enjoyed the video, please do like, share, and subscribe. We hope to see you soon in our next video.